Seated. The chamber continues its hearing. Today, the chamber continues to hear the remaining testimony of civil party Sansapon, and we then commence to hear testimony of a witness through TCW 858. Yesterday, Sen Hyun Tang, the TPO staff who accompanied the civil party during his testimony yesterday, is not available today, and the chamber therefore assigns Chung Superior a visual staff to accompany the civil party during his testimony today. Chief Si Huang, please report the attendance of the parties and other individuals at today's proceedings. Mr. President, for today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. Mr. Nunji is present in the holding cell downstairs as he waived his direct presence in the courtroom. His waiver has been delivered to the greffier. The witness who is to conclude his testimony today, that is Mr. Sansapon, is ready and present in the courtroom. We have a reserved witness today, that is through TCW 858. The witness confirms to his knowledge he has no relationship by blood or by law to any of the two accused, namely Nunji and Keo Sampon, or any of the civil parties admitted in this case. The witness took an oath yesterday before the Iron Club statue. Thank you. President, thank you. And before the chamber hands the floor to the defense teams, the chamber decides on the request by Nunjia. The chamber has received a waiver from the accused Nunjia, dated 28 July 2015, which notes that due to his health, namely headache, backache, and that he cannot sit and concentrate for long, and in order to effectively participate in future hearings, he requests to waive his rights to participate in and be present at the 28 July 2015 hearing. The defense for the accused has informed his client of the consequences of the waiver, that it cannot be construed as a waiver of a fair trial right or right to challenge evidence presented or admitted to the court at all times. Having seen the medical report of Nunji by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC, dated 28 July 2015, who notes that Nunji has chronic back pain and dizziness when he sits for long, and recommends that the chamber grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the chamber grants Nunji his request to follow today's proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs via an audio-visual means. The AV unit personnel are instructed to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Nunji can follow it remotely. That applies for the whole day. The chamber now hands the floor to the defense team for Nunji to put questions to the civil party. And counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning, Counsel. Mr. President, before I ask my questions to the civil party, with your leave, I would like to make some observations and request for clarification in respect of a document from which I would like to read an excerpt to the civil party. I was intending to read an excerpt from a document, a DC CAM statement, document E 305/13.23.292. It's a document that has also an E3 number, E3/8991. As I understand from a recent request for disclosure from the prosecution and also checking Xylab, this is one of 66 DC CAM statements relating to the Trapping Tma Dam. If I understand correctly, these documents have been added and created in Xylab only very recently, mid-June of this year, so 1 month, 6 weeks ago. Yesterday, I think we didn't put in the discussion the fact that we also have to deal in relation to the upcoming witnesses and civil parties with, I presume, 2,500 pages of DC CAM statements. What I would like to ask clarification of from the prosecution is whether it's correct that only a limited number of these DC CAM statements are translated into English. We know for sure that none of them are translated into French. And if that's the case, then that would be another problematic situation for us having to read another 2,500 pages on a short notice. But it seems that other than the prosecution, no parties or the judges, I think, were having access to these documents before mid-June a month ago. So two things, summing up, I think the issue of those 66 DC CAM statements leading up to approximately 2,500 pages should be a matter I think should have been raised yesterday to have a full picture of the disclosures. But also we have a problem because obviously part of our team can read Khmer, but the international side of our team obviously cannot. So I don't know if the prosecution can shed light on whether they know when translations in English are going to be available of these DC CAM statements. Thank you.
Bonjour Monsieur le Président.
Good morning, President. If there is a problem with English translations, they are even more dire in French. If we have done some verifications and there are no French translations available.
President Judge Laverne, you have the floor.
To make everything clear for everyone, could it be possible to explain whether there was a decision deeming these documents receivable? The prosecutors followed the same procedure that they did for the statements in 03 and 04 that were made available to the parties. It's the same principle. Judge Laverne. Mr. Cooper. are asking to be able to use this document for the examination of this witness. So you want this document to be admitted as a new evidence?
No, I think it's already admitted. It has even an E3 number. So I don't think the issue of admitting documents is the relevant question right now. What I think my colleague referred to was the summary of all 66 persons that testified to DCCAM. A summary was recently disclosed to us. So that's why we know it's 66 statements. So that it was recently disclosed 2 weeks ago, last week I think. I have an English translation of this particular DCCAM document, of which I would like to show an excerpt to this witness. But trying to see the broader picture of these DCCAM statements, we then realized what the background is of this particular statement and the other 65 DCCAM statements. So the reason that I was rising is to complement the things that I said yesterday, what we are dealing with in terms of case file and the enlargement of case file when it comes to the dam, and asking for clarification in respect of the outstanding English translations of these 66 DCCAM statements, of which at least this one is already translated. That's why I was able to read it, and that's why I was planning to read an excerpt to this particular civil party.
Merci pour ces...
Thank you. So it is clear that for today's purposes you want to use this DCCAM statement for your examination. But you're also asking, more generally speaking, whether these documents will be admitted as evidence in the case at hand?
No, because I think technically they are admitted, because if they have an E3 number, that means that they must have been admitted by the trial chamber already. How that was done without having a translation, I'm not quite sure, but so for practical purposes, the excerpt from the document that I'm going to be quoting from is admitted as evidence. It has an E3 number, E38991. But I was wondering how to position this document in the broader context of these 66 DCCAM statements.
Excusez-moi.
I apologize for insisting, Councillor, but this document, or I seem to understand that this document was put in Zylab only in June. And so, having been put in June, how could it be considered admitted into the case file? I don't understand. Somewhat a bit confusing situation, but perhaps the co-prosecutors could shed some light on the matter.
The International Deputy Co-Prosecutor, you may proceed, sir, is the President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to admit, I don't fully understand what the concern is here. What I see on Zylab is that this is a document that was admitted onto Zylab in April of this year, and it's a document that is dated 16 June 2011. In relation to broader questions about what translations are available, when we disclose documents, we disclose all available translations that we have. The schedule of translations is something that's controlled by the Interpretation and Translation Unit. And one final point that I would make at this time is that, of course, DC CAM documents are publicly available documents. So these are not documents that were available exclusively to the co-prosecutors before we chose to disclose them into Case 2. Sorry, I will say one additional thing in relation to the document that Counsel for Q Sampan, I believe, was referring to, which was a summary of DC CAM statements. Most, if not all, of those DC CAM statements that those summaries are based on are themselves already been disclosed into Case 2. And so the issue of the summaries, whether that has been translated or not, I think is somewhat of a secondary matter.
President, once again, the floor is given to Judge Levine.
Could you tell us if this specific document that Mr. Koppe would like to use today was covered by a request to be admitted as new evidence? Has the Chamber already ruled on the admissibility of this document? Or regardless, do you or the civil parties have an objection to Mr. Koppe using this document this morning for his examination?
I would have to do some research to find out what the procedural history of this particular document is. Obviously, since it's only being raised in court at this time, haven't had a full opportunity to research that. Again, based on the fact that it has an E3 number, that would usually indicate that it has been admitted, but have no objection to Mr. Koppe using this document with the civil party today.
President, and the lead co-lawyers for civil parties, do you wish to make any observation regarding the request made by Defense Counsel Copper?
We have no objection, President. Insofar as what I understand that this document that Nguyen Chia's defense wants to use is part of the documents that were put in on the interface yesterday. Process seems to be in order, and this document has an E3 number. In the end, I don't understand what the problem is, and we have no objection.
President, since the document that Council Copper would like to use during his questioning through the civil party, and it already bears the E3 number as part of the case file, Council Copper actually can refer to this document during his questioning to the civil party. And you may proceed, Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Civil Party. I have some questions that I would like to ask you this morning. Did I understand correctly that you were born in Battambang province, but were you also raised there, or did you and your parents move to Phnom Penh quickly afterwards?
Civil party, actually I grew up in Phnom Penh since my father was a soldier working in Phnom Penh.
So, let's say in the first 5 or 10 years of your life, you lived in Phnom Penh. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
What rank, if you know, did your father have in the Lon Nol army?
He was a lieutenant in CBE section.
And where was he stationed? Was he stationed in Phnom Penh, or was he stationed outside of Phnom Penh?
He was based at Chkamon, and later on he was sent to station at Trapeang Priay in Phnom Sat.
Yesterday you testified that your father was killed because he was a Lon Nol military. Do you know when he was killed?
I did not know as to when. I only heard about the death of my father from the old woman, and his death was around late 77 or early 78. That was the time that my father's village was flooded and he was evacuated to another area.
So, do I understand your testimony correctly to be that your father was still alive sometime in 77?
He was probably still alive in 1977. However, Yecham group arrived in 1978, and it was likely that my father was killed by that time.
Why do you say likely? You are technically not allowed to speculate, but I would like to ask you anyway. Why do you say likely killed in 78?
because there was a flood at that time and he was evacuated. And later on, I met the old woman Trop, and she told me the area that he lived was flooded and he was evacuated elsewhere.
He was evacuated because of a flood. How do you know, or why are you saying that he was likely then killed in 78? I'm not sure if I understand correctly.
I don't understand your question. Please rephrase it.
My original question to you is why you say that he was likely killed in 78. And then you answered that he was evacuated after a flood. So my question is, what has the evacuation and the flood to do with the likely killing of your father?
During the evacuation, Ye Trop, who was living next to my parents' house, told me that my father was taken away and my mother accompanied him. And that was during the time the flood actually entered the area, and since my family members, including my parents, disappeared.
I understand, but why are you saying that your father was killed because he was a former Lon military? What is your source of knowledge leading you to say that?
The old woman Trop works together with my father, and when